Hi, I'm Ann Parker. Today we're going to go over our bylaws for Blue Star Mothers of America. The bylaws tell how our organization operates. To start with, Article 1 says we're to be governed by the following documents in the order in which I will tell you about them. The United States Constitution, the U.S. Code, Title 36, Chapter 305, governing Blue Star Mothers of America, which is also called our Congressional Charter, and the following organizational documents: Constitution, Bylaws, Code of Conduct, the Affiliation Agreement, which governs national, department, chapters, and auxiliaries between the National Executive Board and each department, chapter, or auxiliary. The most current version of Robert's Rules of Order shall be the source of parliamentary procedure to be used at all levels of the corporation, and disciplinary procedures will be governed and administered by Article 12 of our Code of Conduct. Article 2 covers members. A member is considered in good standing whose dues have been paid, who adheres to our governing documents and the membership oath, which she signed upon joining the corporation, and has not received any disciplinary action within the last 6 months, either from the National Executive Board, the department, the chapter, or their auxiliary. We don't allow members at large. All members must belong to a chapter. You can't hold membership in more than one chapter. Members may attend meetings and functions of the corporation with the exception of closed executive sessions at any level, meaning the National Executive Board, the Department Executive Board, the Chapter Executive Board, or the Auxiliary Executive Board. A member of a disbanded chapter, if in good standing at the time their chapter is disbanded, may up to 1 year transfer to another chapter in accordance with our Code of Conduct. Section 4. The NEB may terminate membership from the corporation for anyone for subservious behavior or other behavior unbecoming or harmful to the corporation. Discipline is set forth in the Code of Conduct, and it shall be used as guidelines for termination of membership. The following shall be, but not limited to, reasons for termination of membership: failure to maintain the requirements of membership, failure to uphold the corporation's objective, purposes, and policies, mishandling of corporation funds or donations, and consistent disruptive behavior that obstructs the corporation's ability to function effectively. Membership dues are covered in Section 5. All dues expire on August 31st of each year. Dues not paid by September 1 will place the member in a grace period. Then, on October 1, if the dues aren't paid, the member is moved to a lapsed state. Dues not paid by January 15th cause the lapsed member to be ineligible to attend the National Convention as a delegate. Lapsed members who do not pay their dues by January 15th will have their membership in the corporation canceled. A member can only be reinstated when all past dues are paid. For chapters that don't belong to a department, 1/2 of the dues amount is allocated to the chapter treasury. The remainder goes to the national treasury. For chapters belonging to a department, the dues allocation is a bit different, with 1/2 going to the chapter treasury, 1/4 to the department, and the remaining 1/4 going to the national treasury. Article 3 covers associates. Associates are considered to be in good standing if they adhere to the governing documents, the membership oath, which they signed upon joining the corporation, and have not received any written discipline within 6 months from either the National Executive Board, Department Executive Board, or the Chapter Executive Board. The corporation does not allow associates at large. They must belong to a chapter, and like members, they cannot hold membership in more than one chapter. They may attend all meetings and functions of the corporation with the exception of executive sessions at any level, national, department, or chapter. An associate of a disbanded chapter, if in good standing at the time the chapter is disbanding, may within 1 year transfer to another chapter in accordance with the Code of Conduct. Here again, the National Executive Board may terminate membership from the corporation for any associate doing subservient activities or other behavior unbecoming or harmful to the corporation. Disciplinary procedures as set forth in the Code of Conduct shall be used as guidelines for termination of associate members. The following shall be, but not limited to, reasons to terminate an associate: failure to maintain the requirements of membership, failure to uphold the corporation's objectives, purposes, and policies, mishandling of the corporation funds or donation, and consistent disruptive behavior that obstructs the corporation's ability to function effectively. Section 5, at the direction of the chapter executive board, the chapter membership chair will contact the national first VP if they have associates which need to be removed from the national website. Article 4, corporation divisions. The corporation is composed of departments, chapters, and auxiliaries, with the National Executive Board acting as the board of directors of the corporation. All department, chapter, and auxiliary officers must sign the affiliation agreement, binding their department, chapter, or auxiliary to the terms of the agreement. A signed copy of the affiliation agreement must be submitted along with a current officer roster through the Blue Star Mothers of America website annually to the National Executive Board or anytime there's a change in officers. Auxiliaries shall be subgroups following the parent corporation's governing documents with bylaws that must not conflict with the Constitution, bylaws, code of conduct, or other procedures of the parent corporation. Auxiliaries may collect dues and elect officers. They may hold the national auxiliaries may hold a meeting with the approval of the National Executive Board in conjunction with the annual National Convention. An annual report must be submitted to the convention body at the National Convention. The following are the current auxiliaries in Blue Star Mothers: the Big Dipper Fund Group, whose purpose shall be for educational assistance. The Gavel Club, membership in the Gavel Club shall be limited to past national presidents, and their purpose will be the promotion of fundraising for 501c3 veteran service organization and social activities. Now, Article 5 covers charters. 3 or more chapters of the same state may submit an application to the National Executive Board to form a department. All chapters in the state will have the option, but will not be required to join the newly organized department. Applications for chapter charters are reviewed by the National 4th VP. It then presents this information to the National Executive Board for approval to ensure there are no issues with either location, name, etc. Upon National Executive Board approval, the National President and the National 4th VP will issue the charter. Upon chartering a new chapter, the National 4th VP shall notify the department president that the chapter will be a part of that department if that chapter is located in a state where there is a department. Section 2, chapters formed before 1990 shall not be required to have a minimum number of members. The last remaining member shall turn in the chapter charter to the National 4th VP or to their respective department. Any chapter falling in this category, which is accepting new members or collecting contributions, must comply with all requirements of the corporation, including but not limited to national documentation filings, which are required by December 1st of every year. A chapter falling in this category that's not accepting new members, nor are they collecting contributions, may relinquish their employer identification number with the IRS by filing a 990 and marking it termination. A copy of that 990 will be submitted to the National 4th VP. At the acceptance of the termination 990 by the IRS, the chapter will no longer be required to file and submit annual reports and financial documents to the national organization. They'll still need to complete an affiliation agreement annually and mail it by email to the first VP on the national level. No department or chapter shall be named after a person. Departments or chapters named after an individual and chartered before 1990 will not be required to change their name. Article 6 covers disbandment. All chapter members must be notified at least 30 days prior to a meeting where a vote for disbandment of a chapter will occur. The national president and the department president, if applicable, will be notified at the same time. The national president may ask the past national presidents on the National Executive Board to work with the individual chapters to explore all efforts to maintain the chapter before it is disbanded. If a department is disbanding, members who fall under their jurisdiction must be notified at least 30 days prior to a meeting where a vote for disbandment of the department will occur. The National Executive Board will be notified at the same time. The national president may ask the past national presidents on the National Executive Board to work with the department to explore all options to maintain the department before it is disbanded. The national president must be notified in writing within 15 days of the meeting whether the department or chapter voted in favor of disbandment or in favor of continuation. Section 2. Within 30 days of the chapter disbandment, all properties such as flags, charter, history, financial records, minutes, money, other assets of a disbanded chapter shall revert to the department under which the chapter functioned. If no department exists, then all of the records must be returned directly to the National Financial Secretary. She'll maintain this following the records retention policy. Physical items such as the flag must be returned via U.S. mail, but all records must be returned in a digital format, not paper. Within 30 days of a department disbanding, the same will occur. All properties, including the charter, flag, history, financial records, minutes, money, other assets of a disbanded department, must be returned digitally to the National Financial Secretary. The National Financial Secretary will maintain them following the records retention policy, and if there are physical items such as a flag, that must be returned to the National Financial Secretary via the U.S. mail. Section 3. A chapter may be reinstated upon application of at least 5 members in good standing. This application must be received within 1 year of the vote to disband. A department may be reinstated upon application of at least 3 chapters in good standing, and here again, that must be received within 1 year of the vote to disband. Executive boards. Article 7. The National Executive Board and the Department Executive Board shall meet within 24 hours after the adjournment of either the National or the Department Convention and immediately before the opening of either the National or Department Convention. Special meetings of the National Executive Board or Department Executive Board may be called by the Department President or the National President or upon request of not less than 5 members of the National Executive Board or the Department Executive Board. Our meetings may be face-to-face, conference call, or by virtual platform. Special meetings of the Chapter Executive Board may be called by the Chapter President upon request of no less than 3 members of the Chapter Executive Board. Meetings may be face-to-face, by conference call, or virtual platform. The National Executive Board, the Department Executive Board, and the Chapter Executive Board must hold meetings as needed to transact all corporation business, not less than quarterly. Meetings may be face-to-face, by conference call, or virtual platform, but we do encourage our chapters to meet at least monthly if at all possible. Section 4 covers a quorum. A quorum of the National Executive Board, Department Executive Board, or Chapter Executive Board must be a majority of the seated officers of each board. A quorum is required for each respective board meeting. So if you have 5 chapter board members, 3 of those must be present for you to hold such a meeting. Now, for a membership meeting, the quorum for membership meetings at any level of the corporation is the number of members present at the meeting with a minimum of 3 of the officers present. Section 5. The executive board at each level, national, department, chapter, or auxiliary, shall ensure compliance of the corporation governing documents to all laws enacted by the U.S. Congress, state, and local governments. Executive boards at every level must have a minimum of 5 elected officers, with 2 of those being financial officers. Chapters must maintain at least the same 5 officer positions as were required for their original charter, those being president, first VP, recording secretary, financial secretary, and treasurer. If any of the 5 principal officers should resign during the fiscal year, that officer must be replaced in order for the chapter to be in compliance with our governing documents. A new affiliation agreement with all of the officers' signatures and an officer roster must be submitted to the National Executive Board via the Blue Star Mothers of America website. Conventions are covered in Article 8. There must be a national or department convention annually for the purpose of electing new officers and for conducting business as may be before the body and planning for the upcoming year. In the event of a pandemic, an act of war, or other act of nature, force majeure, an event or circumstance which is beyond the control and without fault or negligence, which would make it impossible to hold or conduct an in-person convention, the annual convention can then be held by electronic means or it may be deferred. In the event of an alternative method of convention, the National Executive Board or Department Executive Board shall determine the protocol and advise their members. Section 2. At least 28 days before the national or department convention, a call for convention shall be ordered by the national president or the department president to be forwarded to all members. The national convention shall be held annually within 60 days prior to the close of the corporation's fiscal year, which, as you know, is August 31st. Department conventions must be held between September 1 and November 30th. Chapter elections for the chapter executive board must be held between August 1st and September 30th. Auxiliary elections must be held between August 1st and November 30th, unless they are conducted during annual convention. The national president and the national executive board must be advised of the date and time of any department conventions, and a formal invitation must be extended to them. National officers, unless they are a delegate of the department holding the convention, have no voting status at department conventions. Members of the National Executive Board and Department Executive Board shall be a delegate at their respective conventions. Each department chapter president shall be a delegate to the National Convention. Each chapter president in a department shall be a delegate at the department convention. If that president cannot attend, no one can take her place. Each chapter is entitled to one delegate for every 10 members in good standing or fraction thereof. All delegates must be a member in good standing. So if you have 11 members, you are entitled to 2 delegates plus your president if she's able to come. But as I stated, if she's not able to come, then no one can take her place. In that instant I gave you, there would be 2 delegates from the chapter. All chapter presidents are entitled to vote at national or department conventions and are not counted, as I just stated in the example, as chapter delegates. The chapter president vote is not transferable to any other chapter member. At the National Convention, each chapter's delegate entitlement will be checked by the National First VP and verified at the registration desk. Only those verified delegates will be issued a delegate badge. Delegate badges may not be transferred if a delegate cannot attend a session or departs the convention early. Now, however, chapters may identify an alternative delegate who may attend convention but doesn't have voting privileges. If a delegate needs to depart convention and will not be returning, she'll surrender her voting credentials, and one of the pre-approved alternate delegates will be substituted and provided with those credentials. Section 7. The minutes of the National Convention shall be reviewed by the National Executive Board prior to posting on the national website. The minutes will include a copy of all reports presented, chapter reports, election reports, the financial report, and financial policy at the convention. These minutes will be available within 45 days of the close of conventions on the national level. Now, on the department level, the minutes shall be forwarded to the National Executive Board within 45 days of the close of the department convention. These minutes shall include chapter reports, election results, and detailed financial reports. And then these documents are also placed on the national website. Section 9. Within 10 days upon an officer's retiring from office or removal from office for any reason, all papers, books, keys, flags, charter, or any other item which is the property of the corporation must be turned over to the successor along with an inventory and be signed by the outgoing and incoming officers. Outgoing officers will assist incoming officers with the transition process and completing month-end fiscal year reporting. The NEB realizes that this may not be possible to immediately turn over all materials and close out financial reporting within 10 days. National Department, chapter, and auxiliary officers must return laptop, printers, etc. were cited in the equipment contract they signed when they took office and took possession of said equipment and any equipment acquired during their term. The equipment contract will be kept by the National Department Chapter Auxiliary Recording Secretary as a permanent record. The installation of officers shall be performed at the close of the national or department convention. Financial officers are next covered in section 9. There shall be no elected or appointed or salaried officers or salaried chairs. The National Executive Board shall have the discretion to hire staff to handle administrative matters for the corporation or a service provider for needed services such as shredding. The National Executive Board shall set the compensation for such staff person. Such compensation must be reasonable within the meaning of the Internal Revenue Code. Such compensation shall be comparable to compensation paid by similar organizations for similar services. At the present time, we have no staff. Expenses incurred by national officers and chairs of existing standing committees in the exercise of their services and duties may be approved for payment from the National Treasury by order of the National Executive Board and the National Finance Committee as funds are available. Pre-approval of expenses is recommended. All persons submitting reports and receipts shall retain a copy of those materials at least until the receipt of those materials have been confirmed by the National President. The national elected officers shall receive compensation in accordance with, but not to exceed, current Internal Revenue Service guidelines to assist with expenses associated with the national duties as defined in the National Financial Policy, the amount of which shall be approved by the National Convention body. The National Finance Chair shall decide when and how often expense reports must be submitted and what documentation must be included in the expense report. It may make recommendations to the NEB with detailed reasons if it believes that certain expenses should be disallowed. Section 5. Prior to the national or department convention, the National Finance Chair or the department financial officers shall prepare proposed financial policies and a budget for the upcoming year. The financial policies and budgets shall be voted on by their respective convention bodies. Upon acceptance by the convention body, the financial policies and budget for the upcoming year shall be entered into the convention minutes. There must be a yearly audit of national financial records by a licensed certified public accountant. A copy of the national yearly audit must be included in the minutes of the convention. Departments, chapters, and auxiliary will have an annual review of their financial records by a committee appointed by the Finance Committee as a part of annual compliance requirements. Reasonable travel expenses of the department presidents to convention and national executive meetings shall be borne by their respective departments. Now let's talk about elections. Article 10. All members nominated for office must be in good standing. There will be no campaigning, positive or negative, for office or any demonstration of such during convention. Applicable to in-person conventions, the National Financial Secretary or the Department Financial Secretary and the National First VP or Department VP shall verify voting delegates. During elections, non-voting members shall move to the rear or side of the convention room as designated by the National President or the Department President. The National President or Department President shall call for the doors of the convention hall to be closed by the Sergeant at Arms. Members leaving during the elections will surrender their voting credentials and may not return until there is a break in the election process. Section 4. There should be a nomination committee appointed by the National President, the Department President, in their respective areas. They will receive nominations and qualifications for each position to be distributed to the membership no later than 30 days before convention. Nominations may also be made from the floor without prior distribution being required. Verification of these nominees that they're members in good standings and meet the qualification for the position will be made prior to a vote being held. Qualification for nominees will be read by the nominations chair and must be no longer than 4 minutes and limited to specific qualifications for the nominated office. Nominees, except under extreme circumstances such as temporary illness, accident, family emergency, natural disaster, or act of war or terrorism, must be present to accept the nomination. In the case of their absence, a letter must be addressed to the National Executive Board or Department Executive Board prior to the convention, stating the office, qualifications for office, acceptance if nominated, and a detailed explanation of why the candidate is absent. Upon receipt of this letter, the candidate will be added to the ballot. Delegates must be present in the convention hall to vote. There is no proxy, there is no absentee voting. The national president may represent any state. All remaining elected officers may represent any department or chapter. Election of officers shall be by ballot, except when there is but one nominee, in which case election shall be via voce. A majority of votes cast is required to elect. At the pre-convention board meeting, the national president or the department president and the National Executive Board or Department Executive Board shall appoint a judge and 3 tellers for the convention elections. The judge shall be a past president, if possible. The tellers should be chosen from different states or chapters for department conventions. All ballots will be counted in private, and the judge will hand the teller's report to the presiding officer, who will read it and declare the winner of the election. If there is not a majority, the 2 leading candidates remain on the ballot, and a second vote shall be taken. The candidate on the second ballot with the majority is then announced as having been elected. The teller's report will be attached to the draft minutes. Ballots shall be secured by the National Recording Secretary, Department Recording Secretary, or Chapter Recording Secretary, and they'll be held for 90 days after the close of convention. Section 10, an officer of the National Executive Board or Chapter Executive Board shall hold office for a term of 1 year or until a successor is elected. The term of office begins immediately upon completion of the installation ceremony held immediately after the close of convention. An officer may serve 1 additional term a year in the same office, whether consecutive or non-consecutively. An officer or chapter level shall hold office for a term of 1 year or until a successor is elected. The term of office begins immediately upon completion of the installation ceremony. So just to be clear, on the chapter level, there are no term limits for your officers. An officer may serve additional terms in the same office, whether consecutively or non-consecutively as the need arise, upon their request and with the consent of her chapter. If a chapter, department, or auxiliary cannot hold an in-person election meeting for this purpose, a member of the National Board shall facilitate the elections portion of the online meeting to ensure election confidentiality. Now, let's talk about our elected officers on the national level and the department level. They must have the following qualifications. The newly elected national president or department president must have served as an elected officer for at least 1 full year on the National Executive Board or Department Executive Board, or have served at least 1 full year as a department president. If the newly elected national president or department president has held any elected or appointed positions at any level at the time of her election, she must resign from these duties immediately upon her acceptance of the higher office. Now, the vice president shall be nominated from members that have served for at least 1 year at any board level position. So that goes down to chapter, auxiliary, or department. The newly elected national treasurer, department treasurer, or national financial secretary or department financial secretary must have a background in accounting or finance. At the chapter level, accounting or financial experience is not required. However, all the chapter officers must attend virtual or other financial training sessions provided by the National Executive Board during the first quarter after their election. The national elected officers included the national president, who's responsible for ensuring that the corporation continues to work and promote the corporation's mission and spirit, following all of our oaths and ceremonies. ensuring that all departments, chapters, auxiliaries, and members comply with their obligations, federal and state laws, governing documents, policies, and convey the mutual cooperation that is necessary for every level of the corporate structure to fulfill the requirements and the mission of the corporation and the Internal Revenue Code. In order to fulfill these responsibilities and subject to the corporation's governing documents, the national president presides over the corporation at large, presides over national meetings, proposes policies and practice, sits on all national committees, monitors the performance of national officers, submits various reports to the board and the members, proposes the creation of committees, appoints members to such committees, and performs and delegates other duties as the need arises. The duties of the national president included, but are not limited to, representing the corporation with dignity and impartiality, attending events like Gold Star Mother's Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day ceremonies, American Gold Star Mothers Convention, etc., or appoint the vice presidents in their consecutive order based on their availability to attend in her stead if she's unable to attend these events. Preside at convention, national executive board, and national committee meetings. Attend department conventions or appoint the vice presidents in their consecutive order based on their availability if she's unable to attend such department convention. Be knowledgeable in the history and governing documents. Appoint non-elected officers, national committee chairs, and a national DC rep, making sure that the entire corporation is represented in these positions. Respond to member questions, inquiry from other organizations, media, etc. Work with the National Executive Board and the National Finance Chair to maintain financial income to support our various programs, projects, and administrative functions, and perform all other actions that are necessary to carry out the duties of her office. Our next elected officer is our first vice president. She must receive and compile membership information for managing membership on the national database. The National First VP is a participating member of the National Executive Board and is expected to participate in National Executive Board meetings. She'll interact accordingly with all department and chapter presidents and those who are designated at the department and chapter levels to update information for members of departments and chapters. The National First VP must have a working knowledge of the corporation governing documents, proper understanding of the sequence of those documents, and relative federal requirements. She'll represent the national president when she's unavailable and carry out any or all duties needed, assigned, or required. The duties of the National First VP include, but are not limited to, receiving and compiling membership information, work with chapters to keep online rosters up to date and accurate, process and file all incoming roster submissions, and forward dues to the National Financial Secretary, along with an inventory of checks received and changing members' expiration dates. She'll process all online applications. She'll maintain a current list with the National Fourth VP of all chartered chapters. She'll forward a notification to a chapter department with information regarding status of a brand new member, and she'll notify a validated member of their username and password and online status and abilities. She'll process mailed-in applications received by the National Financial Secretary and add new members to the database. She'll delete members, associates, and applicants when requested by chapter officers. She'll answer all email questions about membership, chapter location, dues, and renewals, and she'll handle renewals, transfers, and lapsed memberships. And she'll prepare a monthly report for the National Executive Board. Our National Second VP, her primary role is the oversight of the monthly newsletter and production of the annual yearbook. The National Second VP is a participating member of the National Executive Board and is expected to participate in National Executive Board meetings. The National Second VP must have a working knowledge of all the corporation's governing documents, proper understanding of the sequence of the governing documents, and any relative federal requirements. The National Second VP is expected to participate in any and all other duties as assigned, needed, or required. The duties of the National Second VP include, but are not limited to, the newsletter, design layout, collect articles from national president, officers, appointed positions, departments, and chapters, and edit such for typographical errors. Now, in regard to the yearbook, she is to design the yearbook, communicate with general membership regarding photos, communicate delivery requirements, options for photos, respond promptly to any and all questions from general membership, communicate with online yearbook publishing company. And now we come to the third VP. The primary role of the third VP is the oversight of the Blue to Gold program. The National Third VP is a participating member of the National Executive Board and is expected to participate in National Executive Board meetings. The National Third VP must have a working knowledge of all corporation governing documents, proper understanding of the sequence of those documents, and any relative federal requirements. The National Third VP is expected to participate in any and all duties as assigned, needed, or required. The duties of the National Third VP include, but are not limited to assist chapters with the procurement of Gold Star banners, maintain and keep current the Blue Star Mothers of America database of our fallen heroes, keep current list of chapter Blue to Gold liaisons, be available to work with department and chapter Blue to Gold liaisons with any help they need regarding interactions with casualty assistant officers, which are also called CAOs, or any other part of the banner presentation process. They are to provide the national chaplain a list of all individuals be honored at the memorial service held at our conventions, acquire a thorough understanding of the Department of Defense, DoD, and Department of Heraldry guidelines for the Gold Star banner, and the difference is in how the military awards types of Gold Star pins and honors. Adhere to the Corporation Blue to Gold program guidelines and update and make improvement to those guidelines as needed with the assistance and approval of the National Executive Board. Now, the National Fourth VP must receive and properly process all applications for new department and chapter charters. She'll interact with all department and chapter presidents and those who are designated at the department and chapter levels to complete online forms for departments and chapters. She'll obtain required information regarding state registration and compliance and work with the chapters to ensure their compliance is completed by the respective deadlines. The National Fourth VP is a participating member of the National Executive Board and is expected to participate in National Executive Board meetings. The National Fourth VP must have a working knowledge of all corporation governing documents, proper understanding of the sequence of those documents, and any relative federal requirements. The National Fourth VP is expected to participate in any and all duties as assigned, needed, or required. The duties of the National Fourth VP included, but are not limited to, review and process applications for new chapter and department charters, reply to all requests regarding new charters, and supply current startup package when required. Assist new chapters as needed with any and all state registration, work with existing chapters to ensure all government and corporate registration and reporting is completed, respond to phone calls and email questions from pending new and existing chapters, follow up with new chapters and ensure they've received all the documents and have access to our online document library. Assist chapter in adding new members to database when the charter is approved and or request the help of the National First VP. Validate pending members that have joined online when the chapter has been approved for chartering and or request help from the National First VP. Charter package for inclusion when mailing out to chapters. Assemble and include all documents and items from the checklist, website instructions, membership cards, and affiliation agreement. Assist new and existing chapters in form completion. Notify the National Executive Board or the Department Executive Board, if applicable, and the National Webmaster of new chapters. Once chartered, provide chapters with appropriate charters. Install chapters when required and ensure installation takes place for all new chapters. Now, in the event of the disbandment of a chapter or department, the National Fourth VP will work with the appropriate department or chapter to ensure that all steps are followed. She'll coordinate with the National First VP, National Financial Secretary, National Treasurer, Webmaster to remove the entity's employer identification number, from the National Group Exemption Letter with the IRS, remove relevant information from the website and database, and assist in transferring remaining members to a chapter of their choice. Now, each year during compliance, she'll perform all work required to ensure that all departments and chapters and auxiliaries are in compliance, to work with new National Executive Board officers for their review of required documents, and update the National Executive Board regularly the status of all compliance. The National Recording Secretary. Her primary role requires knowledge, commitment, and best practices following parliamentary guidelines for elements of recording minutes as the legal record of the proceedings and all actions of the National Executive Board meetings, including the pre-convention meeting, the National Convention, and the post-convention National Executive Board meeting. The National Recording Secretary is a participating member of the National Executive Board and is expected to participate in National Executive Board meetings. The National Recording Secretary must have a working knowledge of all corporation governing documents, proper understanding of the sequence of the governing documents, and any relative federal requirements. The National Recording Secretary is expected to participate in any or all duties as needed, assigned, or required. The duties of the National Recording Secretary include, but are not limited to, the exact wording of motions and the result of the vote. Notice of motions. Previous notice is sometimes required for complicated or compound motions. In roll call votes, the record of each person's vote is included. They are to record all meeting procedures. The official copies of the minutes shall include committee reports, officers' reports, written motions, tellers' reports, and correspondence. They are to provide draft mentioned minutes for the webmaster to post on the national website. Barring any unusual circumstances, this distribution of convention minutes shall be completed within 45 days of the close of the post-convention meeting. She is to prepare and mail announcements of the national president's election to office to other veteran service organizations. She is to assist the national president in preparing all press releases and is to assist the national president distribute documents as necessary. She is to arrange for National Executive Board signatures on the affiliation agreement at the post-convention meeting, and when completed, forward to the webmaster for posting on the national website. She sets up all Zoom meetings for the National Executive Board and committees. Next, we have the National Financial Secretary. She will receive and deposit all money to the National Treasury Bank account, income, and transmit all bills to be paid with the authorization of the National President, National Executive Board, and the National Finance Committee. She must maintain accurate financial records, submit monthly financial reports to the National Executive Board and the National Finance Committee. The National Finance Secretary is a participating member of the National Executive Board and the National Finance Committee and is expected to participate in National Executive Board meetings. The National Financial Secretary must have a working knowledge of all corporation governing documents, proper understanding of the sequence of the governing documents, and relative federal requirements. The National Financial Secretary is expected to participate in any and all other required duties assigned or as needed. The National Financial Secretary must have a documented financial or accounting experience. The position requires knowledge and commitment to the best practices, accounting principles following Internal Revenue Code guidelines as a fiduciary of a nonprofit charity. She must provide efficient and accurate entry into the online accounting software program. The duties of the National Financial Secretary include, but are not limited to receive, deposit, and record all funds received by the corporation, whether those funds are electronic or paper-based. Copies of items deposited must be kept and filed with bank-issued deposit receipt. Make notations in the software program to show from whom and where the deposits are from. The records must identify the donor organization and be recorded in the correct income, expense, or balance sheet category. Specifically, funds due to departments or chapters must be maintained. She is to receive all invoices, and copies of all invoices will be immediately scanned and forwarded to the members of the National Finance Committee and the National President for approval. After approval of the invoice, the National Financial Secretary will receive the payment check from the National Treasurer with a copy of the invoice and a pre-addressed stamped envelope for mailing. Upon receipt, the National Financial Secretary will review the check for accuracy, countersign, and forward to the proper merchant or requester. Pre-authorization payments will be made by the National Treasurer electronically. It's responsibility of the National Financial Secretary to review all bookkeeping entries to ensure accuracy and timeliness of payments. She must maintain accurate financial records and prepare special reports as requested. Working with the National Treasurer, submit monthly financial reports to all members of the National Executive Board to include copies of bank statements, bank reconciliation, profit and loss, balance sheet statements, and a listing of all distributions made from the bank account. She is responsible to the National President's request to select an auditor, submit financial information for the CPA to file the annual 990 tax return to the IRS, respond to the National President's request for providing financial data for the 990 tax return, and manage the NEB approved shipment account, ensuring pickup and delivery of the required shipment. The National Treasurer. The National Treasurer position requires knowledge and commitment and to the best practices accounting principles following Internal Revenue Code guidelines. As a fiduciary of a nonprofit charity, the National Treasurer must have documented financial or accounting experience. The National Treasurer is a participating member of the National Executive Board and the National Finance Committee and is expected to participate in National Executive Board meetings. The National Treasurer must have a working knowledge of the corporation governing documents, providing understanding of the sequence of the governing documents and any relative federal requirements. The National Treasurer is expected to participate in any or all other duties as needed, assigned, or required. The duties of the National Treasurer include, but are not limited to, inspection of all invoices prior to payment for accuracy, pay all bills of the corporation upon receipt of disbursement requests, ensuring all requests are approved by the National President and the National Financial Secretary prior to preparing payment. Ensure all checks are properly prepared, signed, and mailed to the second signer. Ensure accurate financial records into the National Online Accounting Software for all expenses from the National Treasury. Properly set up and payment of pre-approved bills through the National's Financial Institute's bill payment system. Track invoices of monthly bills to make sure they are received for on-time payment to avoid late fees and/or cancellation of services, and maintain and report employer identification numbers to the Internal Revenue Service, the master list of department chapter auxiliaries that are listed under the corporation's Internal Revenue Code designation. She is responsible for the online store inventory and sales, and she must ensure that adequate inventory is maintained at all times while balancing the projected needs of the members with available funds. She is to maintain and store all inventories in a clean and safe environment, ensuring that the quality of the items are maintained. Establish a separate monthly inventory control worksheet detailing the items available and conduct a random audit of inventory. She is to process all online store requests in a timely manner, generally once a week. If a check is used in payment, the National Treasurer will work with the National Financial Secretary to process the order, fill the order, and note on the order sheet when the items are mailed. She'll maintain an adequate supply of mailing supplies, which include envelopes, boxes, bubble wrap, etc., so that orders can be filled. She'll research to determine the most efficient, cost-effective mailing service to send out the orders. All other expenses must be detailed by the type and submitted to the National Finance Committee and National President for approval. Now let's talk about vacancies of those officers. The elected officers on the National Executive Board, Department Executive Board, Chapter Executive Board, or auxiliaries shall declare an elected office vacant upon resignation, death, or after 3 months of inactivity. The National Executive Board, Department Executive Board, Chapter Executive Board, or auxiliaries shall appoint a qualified replacement with a two-thirds majority vote of the entire National Executive Board, Department Executive Board, Chapter Executive Board, or Auxiliary. Written notification of that vote and its results must be sent to all applicable members within 30 days. A revised affiliation agreement showing the change in officer position will be posted on the national website for changes occurring on the National Executive Board. Appointed officers and chairs, the president at any level of the corporation, meaning department, national or chapter or auxiliary, shall declare a vacancy upon resignation, death after 3 months of activity and appoint a qualified replacement for said appointed officers and chairs. Notification of that appointment will be made to all applicable members within 30 days. Temporary vacancy. If an elected officer at any level of the corporation is temporarily unable to fulfill her office, then the applicable executive board may, by a majority vote, choose a qualified replacement to temporarily take over the responsibilities of that officer. If an appointed officer is likewise temporarily unable to fulfill her duties, then the applicable president of the chapter, department, or auxiliary level shall appoint a qualified replacement to temporarily take over the responsibilities of that office. Now, Article 13 talks about standing committees. Standing committees shall be appointed by the national president or the department president as soon as possible after the close of convention. The standing committees shall be the Financial Committee and the Governing Documents Committee, if needed, meaning it's a governing documents year. A conflict resolution committee, a grievance committee, and other ad hoc committees as may be necessary. The chair of each committee serves at the discretion of the national president or the department president and can be removed from that position without cause. These committees function under the guidance of the National Executive Board or Department Executive Board, and all powers and authorities of the committees are derived from the appropriate National Executive Board or Department Executive Board. Article 14 talks about the appointed positions at the national, department, chapter, auxiliary level can include parliamentarian, patriotic instructor, historian, sergeant at arms, and chaplain. And at the national level only, we have two additional appointed officers, the VAVS representative and the Washington, D.C. representative. Other appointments as needed can be made. These positions serve at the discretion of the national president, the department president, the chapter president, or auxiliary president, and can be removed without cause. Article 15 covers electronic communications and social media. The corporation encourages and promotes participation in electronic communications, social media, and internet representation of our departments, chapters, and auxiliaries in an ethical manner that increases awareness about and positively represents the corporation. These guidelines are for the protection of our members, entities, name, emblem, and trademark of Blue Star Mothers of America Incorporated. At all levels of the corporation, the primary communication meeting for our members, that vehicle is the meeting minutes, agendas, and copies of financial reports will be sent via email, not, I'll emphasize again, not social platforms. Email is how these documents are to be transmitted to our members at all levels of the corporation. Content utilizing the corporate trademark in any type of electronic social media platform must be proper and relevant, upholding to the corporation's purposes and policies. Content shared via electronic social media platform must be considered relevant, which includes proper and suitable posting on or about corporation meetings, events, and members. Members understand that once submitted, posted, the content is public and is considered permanently available to others. Content communicated via electronic social media platforms must not divulge private information about an individual. It must follow operations security rules, commonly called OPSEC. Comments about any political candidate or promoting a political interest are strictly prohibited. Should an individual choose to comment on a political candidate or political interest, that individual must remove any and all references to Blue Star Mothers of America. And finally, Article 16. Amendments. These bylaws may be amended every 3 years at the National Convention by a two-thirds vote of the eligible voting delegates present and voting. An emergency bylaw proposal may be submitted in a non-bylaws proposal year in the event current governing documents would be in conflict with a change in local, state, or federal laws. Any proposed amendments and resolutions shall be circulated to all departments, chapters, members at least 30 days prior to convention, so the membership will have the opportunity to review all proposed amendments and make recommendations to their respective convention delegates. Any department, chapter, or member submitting proposed amendments and/or resolutions must include an explanation for the proposed change or be present at convention to have a representative at convention speak to the proposal. Amendments passed by the convention body shall be reviewed by the National Executive Board and the corporation's legal counsel for conformity and compliance with the corporation's charter and Section 501(c)(3) of the Internal Revenue Code as amended. And amendments to the governing documents shall take effect at the close of the National Convention at which they were adopted. With a two-thirds vote of the convention body, a specific amendment may take effect immediately. And this concludes our training of our bylaws.